Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior professional from the corporate world in India, from New Delhi, Mr. Ajay Nayyar. And we are going to speak about a subject which is one of my favorite topics, which is whiskey. Ajay, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for calling me to your show. Thank you very much. Delighted.
Thank you. Ajay is the Chief Operating Officer of Tulleeho, India, which is India's premium drink consulting firm. He was earlier with Diageo. So, Ajay, let me ask you my first question. Tell me about your journey and what sparked your passion for the world of spirits and hospitality.
I think I was always on the other side of the restaurant, and my whole dream was to become a chef. Because when I started way back in 2007, we were hosting the Commonwealth in 2010 as a country, and I realized that India need a lot of chefs, and I was inspired with cooking shows, watching the documentaries on YouTube that time, and wanted to be a chef. But I realized that something else is brewing on the other side of the hotels, and I was very fascinated with people coming to the hotel and drinking a good quality of a spirit, more like a scotch or a cognac. And then the wine culture came to India in 2010 when people started traveling to Europe.
Yeah.
I was very fascinated. I thought it maybe as a first mover advantage, I'll be able to go into this world and educate people on wines and spirits. That's how this spark came to me. Worked with some hotels in the beginning, Taj, ITC, and Oberoi hotels to start with. Then I actually moved to Tulleeho for a short stint as doing execution and event management mostly with the other senior trainers. And when I saw trainers talking to the consumers in the trade about the brand, that also really fascinated me to become more like an educator, more like a brand ambassador.
How amazing. And what an amazing journey. But you also spent time with Diageo. How did that experience shape your understanding of luxury in the beverage industry?
Yeah, no, as luck would have it, Diageo was very solely operating in India in that point of time. But when Diageo took over USL in 2014, I was probably one of the first brand ambassador to join them. And they were actually building a lot of luxury space in this market. Brands like Johnny Walker were more like a Russian to a lot of the Indian consumers, because when they used to travel outside India, they'll actually carry these two bottles, as the allowance that you get to buy duty-free alcohol at the airport. But what Diageo has fabulously done is to build that portfolio and largely in a luxury space. So now if you see consumers, when I go to duty-free now, when I talk to the ambassadors, it's surprising that people have actually moved from, say, black to a gold, which is selling it the most. And obviously, talking about the other variants, whether it is Blue Label or whether it is Johnny Walker XR. But Diageo has built a great luxury space in this country.
Absolutely. And whiskey, like cigarettes, is probably one of the best price laddered products I have ever met or ever seen. You got a brand at every price category.
Absolutely. And Scotch whiskey has been the core at the Diageo's portfolio.
Yeah.
And the best thing is you can buy a whiskey at 1,000 rupees. You can go up to 4 lakh rupees for a bottle.
Absolutely.
We talk about Scotch whiskey. So I say Diageo is a company which is almost like portfolio for everyone.
Correct.
You have the most economical whiskey, the most celebrated one, which is Johnny Walker Red Label. And then you have the Johnny Walker Blue Label. And in between, there are so many other variants.
Absolutely. Well said. So now let's talk about whiskey and malts in India. And my first question for you in this area, Ajay, is what defines a luxury whiskey experience for the modern Indian consumer?
Yeah, so it's no longer just about an expensive bottle at the moment. It's about the more immersive experiences that brands are building it. Whether you see the Indian consumers are going for a very bespoke settings, say in hotel, bars, in restaurant, or talking about brands like Singleton who have done multi-sensory engagement that basically make you enjoy whiskey and feel you more exclusive and memorable. The other point here is obviously the storytelling and the local culture that has really played a bigger role. I mean, I can give you an example of a brand called Glenmorangie. They actually collaborated with some of the Indian artists to create their limited edition pack, which is more towards digital art, music experience. And this is what India is known for. This is what the India vibrancy is all about. this is what people are taking the next step in the luxury experiences.
Very interesting. But, I have been consuming malt since probably 1984, 85, 86 when I first moved to Singapore.
Yeah.
How has perception of whiskey evolved in India? And what is it that makes malt so popular now?
Yeah, two things. One is whiskey in general, which is quality over quantity,
Correct.
and second is whiskey is now from mass to class.
Hmm.
Now, a decade ago, whiskey in India was often about volume, inexpensive blends, consumed at gatherings, mostly your weddings, and then basically you started importing some of these, amazing limited edition bottles.
Yeah.
So it has really changed, from curated whiskey collections, limited releases, and the last and the most important thing is the aspirational lifestyle choice. So it's not just a party drink that you drink whiskey, water, soda at a family gathering, but it has also become very very aspirational for Indian consumers
Correct.
to drink whiskey as a very superior quality of drinks. The second point is obviously rise of Indian single malts. Now, 10 years back, many Indians were skeptical about homegrown whiskies.
Yeah.
But now Indian single malts enjoyed the top shelf alongside with Scotch. In
Correct.
fact, some of them have actually surpassed the Scotch single malts in some of the
Yeah.
domestic sales,
Yeah.
which is very dramatic reputational turnaround. And Indians are traveling, so younger, well-traveled Indians openly compare local single malt with the world best. You see these
Absolutely.
conversations happening at the bar. This malt is better than your malt, and there is also a very pride and a proud movement, which you see in different other categories also.
Correct.
But when it comes to whiskeys, also the younger, which is more towards a very experimental audience. So it's not just an old man drink anymore. It's going to all the younger audience. So
Correct.
it
Correct.
used to be the drink when you graduate, but that has changed. So the the newer consumers in their 20s and 30s are embracing whiskey as a very early drink. And they're
Absolutely.
actually experimenting with various brands and styles rather than just sticking to one so-called a family label.
Very
Yeah.
true. Very true. But also, the other thing that I've also noticed, Ajay, is that a lot of women are switching to whiskey.
Yeah.
What is it that makes the Indian whiskey consumer different from so many other markets?
Yeah. Can you just repeat your question? This one.
I said, I also seen a lot of women have
Yeah.
started shifting from the white spirits to whiskey.
Okay.
What
okay.
is it that makes the Indian whiskey consumer, and including both men and women, different from global consumers?
I think this is what we have done is we've really acknowledged and we have really celebrated the growth of the women whiskey audience. And the first of brands need to recognize that women are the fastest growing segment in India's whiskey scene. In fact, women, if you see the data, they accounted for 64% of the new growth in single malt sales.
Wow.
And this is very recently from a survey that was done in India, and which is actually huge. So dropping that old macho whiskey stereotypes is probably the step one. And second thing is that marketing imagery and the messaging that a lot of brands have done. What they've also done is they've made whiskey as also a very gender inclusive product. They may think of a woman centric, say a gin brand, but when it comes to whiskey, they really want to include everybody in that
Correct.
thing, which I think is a great thing. A beautiful example, which I always share with my audience is look at the lady who now blends Johnny Walker. And she's actually a lady. Her name is Emma Walker.
Yeah.
And she's talking about whiskey. She's talking about, all the brand comms as a woman enjoying a dram in a social setting, or say influencers or female whiskey experts. And all of these signals that whiskey is actually for everyone.
Correct.
But my other point here also is that I would like to share in this podcast, and thank you for asking me this, is also creating inclusive and safe whiskey experiences. Now, one practical way is to engage women through very tailored event, but also talking about, women, probably finding a whiskey club in India. I can give an example of India's first woman bartender, Shadbi Basu, which has been really vocal in educating women about whiskey, and even notes that the brands are going out of the way to showcase their liquids via masterclasses or whiskey pairings for women. So I think the effort is continue and is expanding. Perhaps the more mentorship programs and more women-led tastings.
Very true. Very true. And what a great response. My next question, Ajay, is that how important is storytelling in building an emotional connection with a luxury whiskey brand?
Yeah.
And give me an example if you can.
Yeah. I think I can give you several example. I myself call myself as a storyteller
Yeah.
because this is my passion, and this is the more pride moment for us to tell stories to Indian consumers on
Mm.
whiskeys.
Mm.
And way back, these stories you can't share in a public forum. Probably a young man talking about whiskey stories doesn't feel like that you're talking to an audience which is which is now growing and evolving to
Mm.
the whiskey space.
Mm.
Storytelling really matters because for an audience, these are all whiskey labels.
Mm.
There is a brown liquid inside the bottle, and what I feel after drinking it, after drinking it, is probably the same.
Yeah.
But it's the story that connects me with the brand. It could be the
Correct.
distiller, it could be the maker of that whiskey, it could be that village which
Mm.
has been, building that whole scene of whiskey. A
Mm.
farmer giving the grain to the distiller, a distiller making the whiskey,
Yeah.
putting that one bottle. For example, I'll give an example of this amazing single malt called the Abelor,
Yeah.
which comes from Speyside.
Yeah.
And there is a beautiful story that every time Abelor whiskey is made, they put that whole bottle in the River Spey,
Mm.
because the distiller says that what you've taken from the River Spey is a lot of water.
Mm.
And it also marks the fishing season during that point of time. So
Mm.
storytelling, I think, is really important. When all
Mm.
these global brands, reach out to us, how can we connect with them? How can we learn all of these stories?
Mm.
People are now moving beyond Glens. Brands like Talisker
Correct.
are very well accepted in Indian market because we would love to have a flavor which is for a very acquired palate and a
Mm.
taste which we all have been, thinking, drinking in mostly blends.
Mm.
So Talisker is a beautiful story that
Absolutely.
it is the distillery is just located by the sea. It is at an latitude of 55 degree. I think 57 degrees. Sorry to say this,
Mm.
57 degree, and they actually do a variation called 57 degree. I'm forgetting that
Huh.
variation, but
Huh.
they actually do a variant on Talisker.
Amazing. I must look for it. I must
Yeah,
look for it.
it's a beautiful, beautiful story,
Mm.
and all of them. There is a beautiful distillery in Scotland, and this actually, I would love to ask the audience also that tell me the smallest distillery in Scotland, and the answer is Edra Dower, which is run by just two people.
Okay.
So these stories really helps.
Huh.
My favorite single malt whiskey is actually a whiskey called Dalwhinnie,
Uh-huh.
and the reason is that Dalwhinnie is located at the highest altitude of
Yeah.
Scotland. So
Yeah.
when you're actually drinking Dalwhinnie, you're probably drinking the water from the highest altitude of Scotland.
Absolutely.
So that really
Absolutely.
works. Yeah.
What these are great story then. I love Dalwhinnie 15,
Yeah.
but my all-time favorite, irrespective of what I may drink, is the Lagavulin 16.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And
That's
it's been my go-to whiskey for at least 25 years now.
oh wow, that's
But
amazing.
huh,
Now they also do a Lagavulin 8.
Lagavulin. Yeah, I've got that also in my bar.
They also do a 8. Yeah.
Absolutely. But my other question is, Ajay, and we were talking about this just before we started recording, is what role do whiskey tastings and masterclasses play in creating a premium brand experience?
Yeah, I should also say that we are also in a very gray market area.
Mm.
We can't promote alcohol with
Absolutely.
advertisement, with say
Mm.
print media or say digital media.
Mm.
But what we can do is this is basically a gateway to appreciation, and tasting and masterclasses. Turn whiskey from a routine to an event.
Mm.
And when we talk about event, there are so many festivals now happening in this country.
Mm.
And for premium brands, these sessions are also golden opportunities to educate consumer palates.
Right.
As a whiskey drinker, I may not know from where in which part of my tongue I feel the saltiness,
Yeah.
which part of my tongue I feel the bitterness,
Mm.
and also how to enjoy the spirit and
Mm.
revealing all of these subtle flavors.
Right.
Scientists will tell you that there are 200 flavors in Scotch whiskey. A
Mm.
human nose cannot detect more than 30, 40 because our
Mm.
nose is not that acceptable like a dog's nose,
Correct.
that can actually accept or
Yeah.
say can smell more flavors. But when someone attend all of these tasting, swirls a Glen or a nosing glass and pick up these notes of say honey or a peat for the first time,
Mm.
it basically becomes like a very aha moment for them. And that experience convert a casual drinker into a loyal enthusiast.
Mm.
If I'm a brand ambassador, say for example of Singleton, and I'm doing Singleton tasting with my consumers, I'm also moving some of these consumers from Glen to my brand.
Mm.
and making them as a very loyal whiskey enthusiast.
Hmm.
The other point also is that tasting good whiskey in the right way can also have a very massive impact on your perception of flavors and
Correct.
nuances.
Hmm.
You know, you should also know that what are good flavors, what are bad flavors.
Right.
And when we do whiskey tasting and you compare one whiskey, say, with another whiskey, you also understand that there are the flavors are not just always good.
Hmm.
There are bad. They're actually good, and they're even better.
Hmm.
Talking about a whiskey like a Johnny Walker Blue Label, why that whiskey is so expensive, is only because you're tasting some of the most rare flavors in
Correct.
that bottle. And
Hmm.
when the blender has made that whiskey, he was probably also picking up some of these rare flavors.
Right.
We call this as 1 out of 10,000 when you talk about a whiskey like a Blue Label.
Hmm. Very interesting. Ajay, you also mentioned that marketing whiskey is in the gray area in most countries, but digital platforms are beginning to reshape how consumers can discover and
Yeah,
learn about whiskey. Are there
right.
any memorable digital campaigns that you can think about for whiskey experiences?
There are actually many, but
Hmm.
obviously to promote whiskey with say on digital platform also,
Hmm.
you need like a surrogate for this also.
Yeah.
So there are so many social media. I call this very often is that the social media is the new cocktail bar,
Hmm.
where basically brands flaunt their offerings and enthusiasts. So
Hmm.
you sip the whiskey with the ice.
Hmm.
So there are actually so many. I can think of some of these examples, but uh, I will again say that mm, I have to find some of these.
No worries, no worries. I'm sure people can search for it in social media. But moving on, Ajay, uh, let's talk a little bit about bars.
Yeah,
And I remember when I was looking, when I was growing up, I'm now much, much older than you. Uh, Going to a bar was not easily accessible. You'd either go to a club,
hmm.
or in my case, since my father was in the army, go to the army mess.
Hmm.
What trends are you observing in India's top bars when it comes to whiskey curation and presentation?
I think I would say this now. What is also happening is the inclusion of a lot of Indian brands on the premium menus.
Mm.
You know, one striking trend is that India's top bars are proudly featuring homegrown whiskies,
Yeah.
alongside with say Johnny Walkers and Macallans of the world.
Hmm.
It's no longer just about imported scotch. For instance, a recent survey of 116 top bars focused on Indian single malts Indri
Hmm.
ranked as the top choice.
Yeah.
You know, which is now also becoming like a staple, and they've
Correct.
surpassed the numbers from a whiskey called the Glenlivet.
Hmm.
And this also shows that bartenders and consumers are also embracing the quality of the single malts that we keep.
Hmm. Hmm.
If you also see Indian whiskey on a top 10 list of a premium bar menu, something almost unheard of a decade ago
Hmm.
is also now very common. So it
Hmm.
also reflects a new pride and confidence also in the local products.
Yeah. 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 No,
And then,
you're very right. Go ahead, please.
I know you were saying something.
No, I was going to say, Ajay, that, you're so right about the Indian whiskey. I remember buying my first bottle of Rampur
Okay,
for $75 in America because I saw an Indian name. And I
right,
realized it has launched in America before it had even come to India.
right,
Why
right.
does this happen? Why do people launch overseas before India?
I think we always think of the brands when they go to global and they come back to us. We may
Right.
give them more respect versus when we launch these brands in India,
Hmm.
and we may not give the equality of these
Hmm.
to these brands.
Hmm.
And the other part also is that you also see that whiskey was never a spirit or
Hmm.
a malt per se was never a category which was mixed in cocktails.
Yeah.
Now today you also see bars, they're doing a lot of innovating whiskey cocktails, front, right, and center.
Hmm.
While you celebrate the neat poach for sure, but
Yeah.
bars are also riding the global wave of whiskey cocktails.
Hmm.
I mean, few years ago, many Indian bartenders will hesitate to mix expensive whiskey in cocktails,
Correct.
but that's changed. Now, menu
Hmm.
boasts creations like smoky old fashioned, say for example, with Lagavulin,
Hmm.
or say a turmeric infused whiskey sour, say for an Indian twist.
Hmm.
Highballs are actually growing. Majority of the brands are talking about whiskey with soda, lots of ice,
Hmm.
citrus, and this has been popularized
Yeah.
by Japanese whiskey culture
Hmm.
also,
Hmm.
which is now showcasing as the most refreshing high-end drinking rather just than a simple peg and a soda.
Correct. Correct.
And the
Very.
brands are also supporting. Look at
Yeah.
Suntory as a company; they were the first, who introduced dedicated highball dispensers in some of the bars globally, and the idea was to ensure that you perfectly mix the highballs.
Fascinating.
And
Ajay, time for
also,
three.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead, please go ahead.
no, it's okay.
I'm going to have time for three more questions for you.
Right.
One of the big problems of whiskey across different bars is how do you ensure a consistent whiskey experience?
Hmm.
I'd love to get your perspective on how can my experience be similar when it comes to a premium outlet or a premium bar?
Okay, I will answer this very honestly. When I was with Diageo, I was responsible for Diageo Bar Academy trainings in north of the India.
Hmm.
And today, when I'm working with Tulleeho, which is a 25 years old company, has rigorously focused on training as one subject for the bartenders. And either you outsource these training to a companies like us, or you have the internal brand ambassadors, and these are one of the most foundational steps. People pouring the whiskey, how do you pour a luxury brand, the quality of ice, the quality of water.
Right.
And majority of luxury brands, I really appreciate this, they're investing heavily in educating the bartenders, hotel staff, and
Hmm.
also nowadays to the retail specialist.
Okay.
Because when you buy a drink at, say, on-trade outlet, like
Hmm.
a Taj, in a Taj Mansingh, but when you love that brand and you want to go to the retail outlet and buy the same brand, now this retail guy is also telling you that amazing story, maybe in three steps, maybe three things that you should know about that brand.
Hmm.
And this is how that single malts, at five-star hotel in a duty free, or say a duty free lounge in Bangalore,
Hmm.
the service and the knowledge is level is now up to the par. I have spoken to many of these duty free brand ambassadors in past few weeks. I have realized that the brands are investing so much money in educating these brand ambassadors. uh, I don't remember when was our time when brands used to have whiskey ambassadors,
Correct.
or say a brand ambassadors. But
Yeah.
today, I think they hire the sales team after the brand ambassador is hired.
Hmm.
I can't name that brand, but there's one of
Yeah.
the brand. They focus so much on brand ambassadors and on advocacy that they think that sales may be a byproduct for them.
Hmm.
With so many brands also in the market, if you want to build consistent whiskey experiences, you can think about whiskey rituals. If I'm a brand, if I'm drinking, say, a particular style of whiskey, if I want consumers also to drink that whiskey in that way,
Hmm.
probably a brand ambassador can shape that as part of the ritual that he has created.
Absolutely. Great response. Time for two more questions for you. Ajay, what emerging trends excite you the most about Indian whiskey and malts?
Yeah, I think the most exciting trend is how very innovative and experimental Indian whiskey producers have become now.
Hmm.
I don't remember when was our time to get a cherry cask in India and
Yeah.
to mature our Indian single malt in a cherry cask. Talking about Indian whiskey producers, doing a seasoned cask
Yeah.
or finishing their whiskey in a particular style of cask.
Hmm.
This is very, very trending at the moment. And some of the Indian distilleries are actually doing cask finish, which is more like a rival to the Scots.
Hmm.
Whiskey aged in X wine barrels, sherry butts,
Hmm.
or even the unique custom made barrels with different woods.
Hmm.
Example could be Amrut Spectrum
Yeah.
that actually uses a barrel constructed from multiple kind of oak.
Okay.
So much on cask experimentations, which
Hmm.
basically means every time you have a new release, it's the new adventure for a whiskey aficionado.
Hmm.
And it is thrilling to see that Indian brands are pushing that envelope and create flavor profiles
Hmm.
people have never ever tasted before.
Very interesting. Very
And
interesting.
second, and the most important thing which I would like to share here is the producers are also becoming very sustainability and very eco-conscious
Hmm.
when it comes to producing the brands.
Hmm.
Whether you build your distillery, say, with sustainable materials, using the renewable energy, or engaging in conservation efforts.
Hmm.
Godawan is a great example into
Yeah.
this, which basically ties into wildlife conservation, supporting the
Yeah.
great Indian bustard, which
Hmm.
also subtly links to the regional identity of that creature.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
And my last question for you, India is, in any case, is the largest consumer of whiskey in the world. Do you think India could become a global leader in luxury whiskey production?
See, we are well on our way.
Yeah.
I mean, the way you are keeping all of these malts at your bar, at your
Hmm.
home bar,
Hmm.
And the way I'm talking about luxury malts to our audience, if you would have asked this a decade or a two ago, it would have sounded far-fetched.
Yeah.
But given the recent developments, it's quite plausible that India could emerge as a global leader in luxury whiskies.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well said.
consider Indian single malt whiskies are now highly regarded globally,
Hmm.
with aficionados and critics acknowledging that India is producing world-class stuff.
Hmm.
The reputation has been hard earned. Early pioneers like Amrut had to first win over the Scotch loving
Hmm.
West before Indian consumers took them very seriously.
Yeah.
But actually, they have succeeded, and today brands like Paul John, Rampur
Hmm.
have shelves full of international awards and often reviewed alongside the best from Scotland or say from Japan.
Hmm.
So while we are a very relatively young industry competing at that level, but it's a strong foundation for a future leadership.
Hmm. Amazing. But on that note, and I've got to tell you a little story from my own journey with malts before I end.
Yeah.
2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, every time we would have a party at home, I would always have two malts. One was the Lagavulin 16 and one was the Macallan.
Wow. Wow.
And those days, both these bottles were $34 in duty free.
Really?
You would be surprised, Ajay, that in those parties, and there must have been at least a dozen parties in those 3 or 4 years in our house, no one used to touch a malt whiskey. Everyone wanted to go for the black label, uh, and that was it. So
Wow.
the understanding of malts has started only in the last 2 or 2.5 decades in our country.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
So
And people have done a great job in building
absolutely,
more and globally also. When
yeah,
I used to do all of these my luxury advocacy sessions, people used to ask me that why malts are now getting popular.
correct,
And the hidden fact also is that majority of malt producers are basically selling their malts like a B2B.
correct,
They're selling it to blenders
yeah,
to blend that malt for a blend. But
hmm,
today it has also become like a very B2C business, which
absolutely.
means the malts are directly selling to the consumers.
Correct, correct. But on that note, Ajay, I just want to say what an amazing conversation this has been with you. Thank you for talking to me about your journey.
Thank you
Thank
for
you for
having
talking
me.
to me. Yeah, thank you for talking to me about my favorite spirit, which has always been whiskey. We
Yeah,
spoke about the luxury whiskey experience. We spoke about Indian whiskey consumer. I think you gave our audience some amazing insights into women as a new category that has
absolutely.
emerged and is a very sustainable category in my view. Thank you also for talking to me about what are some of the trends you are seeing and what a lot of whiskey companies are doing to be able to train not just hotel bar staff, but also retail staff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ajay, for speaking to me and good luck to you.
Yeah, and just last one fact which I
Yeah.
would love to share with you because you're a Lagavulin fan. You'll be surprised to know that Dave Broom, who is one of the top-notch writers of whiskeys in Scotland,
Hmm.
he actually went on a trip to US, and this was a project that he was doing to mix Lagavulin with 4 mixers.
Wow.
And surprisingly, it was never mixed with a ginger ale, soda, water. It was actually mixed with Coca-Cola
Hmm.
that people really enjoyed the most.
Yeah.
And the drink was called Smoky Cokie.
Okay. Very interesting.
It became a very popular drink in US actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, and people were telling me that the Lagavulin was not doing really well in US.
Hmm.
So when
And it took off.
The Smoky Cokie was launched, people loved the flavor of smoke and coke coming
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
It was more approachable, more accessible, was more delicious, and Lagavulin went out of the shelves.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you again,
Thank you,
Ajay.
sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking forward to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.